Herzlich willkommen im Meistersaal und herzlich willkommen Alexander Hacke and Gareth Jones.
Hello.
Hello.
Good.
This here has actually been the very first time this song has been the occasion for the very first time that you were in this room. Is that right?
Yeah. And the first time that, at least as far as I remember, the first time that we met was in this room.
Yeah, that's as far as I remember as well now. It's become the official story. That's the story, right? We met in this room. But we think we really did. It's quite funny because we wanted to play, obviously, and the occasion of us meeting was when I was working with Frank Tovey, now dead, of course, rest in peace, Frank. And this song called Collapsing New People was inspired by Berlin and Einstürzende Neubauten. And we invited them to come and play on the Middle Eight. But we think now that they've been cut out of the radio edit.
It's the so-called radio edit. So
because obviously
no more fun.
That's the video. That's the short version. So anyway. So we were hoping to hear the Neubauten bit, but it's not there. Not on the video. But anyway.
The artist is called Fad Gadget. We should probably mention him with his artist name as well. And you had been working with him in London already, right?
I don't know. I think we did the whole album here. The album was called Gag, and the cover of the album is Fad wearing that feather suit. And it's an Anton Corbijn photo, actually. It's the first time I met Anton Corbijn as well. And so that was a wonderful experience, And it was wonderful meeting you guys and, having you come in and set up and play on the Middle Eight. So, and I guess that was the start of I think I might already have met Blixer because I think he came to visit Daniel on a Depeche Mode session. And then I had the very great pleasure of making some records with...
I think also the birthday party we're recording in Hansa 2 while you were mixing Depeche Mode upstairs or something like that. I think that was...
The birthday party where... I don't think I was mixing Depeche, but I was mixing something else upstairs. Yeah. I was mixing something else upstairs and Daniel was here with the birthday party for sure. And I said, look, man, come and look at this studio, maybe we... So anyway, it's a lot of history and it's a long time ago. But it's very important space for me.
Yes, we spent the formative years of our youth in this room.
Yeah, we did.
Did you grew up in Neukölln, right? Or you were born in Neukölln, which was part of West Berlin. For anyone who might not know, I did not know, to be honest, until very recently. Were you aware of Hansa Studios existing as a teenager, or was that a totally different world that you thought you could never enter?
Yes, I was aware of it. I had an older cousin, she's like 4 years older, and she would listen to those David Bowie records, and also she would scare the hell out of me with Roxy music. As a little kid, I was afraid of Brian Ferry's voice.
How?
I couldn't stand the vibrato. It would give me the creeps. Mommy, Katherine's playing that music again.
I think it's a really funny story that someone who would continue to make music that is as scary as Einstürzende Neubauten would be scared of Roxy music, but fair enough.
I don't know if Neubauten's frightening music. I thought of it as having dark edges and melancholy, but I never thought about, I don't know. It's not for me to say what the group was trying to do. I never had the impression the group was trying to shock people, but not frighten them necessarily.
Let's say it's passionate music, and that can be frightening.
Is there such a thing as a frightening record to you then, Gareth?
Is there I'm not frightened by music. No, music doesn't frighten me.
That's a very good thing because it has been your job for many years now. Yeah. And to go back to that, in the 70s, late 70s, you started working in a few studios in London. When did you first become aware of Hansa Studios, or when did you first get invited to move to Berlin and to work here?
Well, I wasn't invited to move to Berlin. I kind of pushed my way in, but I worked with another Neue Welle band in the early 80s or something, and the manager was a guy called Connie Konsak, and he said to me, I was very nervous, young guy, and I wanted to go back to London to mix the record that I'd recorded with this band, because I just wanted to mix it somewhere I felt safe and confident. But then Connie said, that's fine. Connie Konsak said, that's fine, but let me show you the Hansa mix room. And I was very young and impressionable, and it was awesome. So I said, okay, if I have to, I'll go and look at the Hansa mix room. All right, Connie. And I kind of walked in the door, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And the same with this room, more importantly, actually. So first of all, I worked in a high-tech mix room upstairs. But then, of course, very quickly, I discovered they had this incredible room. And just to say to everyone here, I mean, I can't see everyone. Let me have a look. Oh yeah, there's quite a lot of people here. That's nice. Thank you for coming, everyone. When we used to make music in this room, it was pretty scummy, right? Now it's like quite.
They cleaned it up nicely, but basically the important parts, like the wooden floor and the paneled ceiling and all that was already there.
And this stage was already here pretty much, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
I think the stage was a bit more echoey. I think they've firmed it up. I remember the stage being a bit bouncy, but.
Yeah, probably it was more like rises. Mm-hmm.
Was this Neue Deutsche Welle band that you first mixed, was that Ideal?
Ideal, yeah.
Was that somehow in a similar scene as the things that you were doing back then, or was that a completely different world?
Well, we all knew each other. We would all frequent the same nightclubs, like the Jungle and stuff. The Jungle is mentioned in Ich stehe auf Berlin, you know, and we would, so we knew each other, and you know, we would make fun of Ideal basically. But F.J. Krüger, who also passed away sadly many years ago, we became good friends too. But in the beginning, it was just that, you know, just like this chauvinist thing, you know, like, oh, you Pop-Tarts, you know, like.
Yeah, that's what it felt like to me, like a different scene for sure. Yeah. But Berlin was a very small scene then, wasn't it? So of course you guys knew each other. Mm-hmm. You know, it was unthinkable that I would meet Blixer Bargeld through Depeche Mode, you know, but I did, because of Daniel Miller, really.
Could you even have imagined to not meet those people? Did it feel as that size of a city where you felt like you could maybe not find an entrance in a certain scene? Or was it really just those few bars where you went, and if you went often enough on a Thursday, then...
I think it was inevitable if you were moving about a certain scene, if you were having certain interests, then you would meet all the main people, because it was just this little village, this little island, basically. But then, of course, if you weren't interested in this kind of music or in music in general, of course, you could go completely different ways. Like, in Berlin, you didn't have the army, for example. There was no draft to the army. So all of my classmates, you know, that wanted to play with guns, they joined the police force. And, you know, of course, they never met the people that I met.
Except in a different way.
Oh, except in a very different situation, yeah.
It's very interesting of you saying that, because I always hear the stories of people who did not want to be in the army and then moved from West Germany to Berlin, because then you didn't have to be in the army, and never considered that obviously there were people in Berlin who really wanted to be in the army.
Yeah, or, you know, basically wanted to, you know, be tough and play with guns. Yeah, they would join the cops.
Back to when this video, or maybe not the video, but the song for the video was recorded, which I think was late 83 probably. You had been with Neubauten, kind of following them for like 3 years, but not all the time as an official band member, is that right?
When I first started playing with them in 1980, I was 14 years old, and so at one point it was decided back then that I should learn about other things of life, and so they basically they put me on vacation, or ich war beurlaubt, and I know what you're gonna play now. But yeah, but I played with them in the very beginning, and then I didn't play with them for a short while, and then I came back as an engineer. Basically, I decided, influenced by the whole industrial music scene out of England, I decided that I rather wanted to manipulate people than to be, you know, like a showgirl for them. And so I decided I wanted to be at the mixing desk instead. So I would do the live sound for Neubauten, very selective engineering. If somebody played something I didn't like, I would play a cassette instead. And then at one point they got bored on stage, and I made my way back up on stage.
So basically you were so bad as a live sound engineer that they just had to make you part of the band.
Yeah, it was, you know, like Gareth moved his way, made his way into Berlin. I made my way back into the band. You know, I was just like.
That's interesting to hear that, actually, because I remember you. Now you've flagged it up as being very interested in the recording process.
Yeah.
And that's why I knew that history, but I'd forgotten about it. So thanks for sharing that, because now I'm going back there and I'm remembering just how involved and interested you were in the recording process, in a way, for instance, that Andrew wasn't particularly.
No.
You know, Andrew was very interested in building instruments and hitting them, but he wasn't that interested in the recording process, I don't think.
No.
So, you know, and you obviously were.
Yeah.
I want to play a video that is like from your very, very early days. But before that, could you say about the other band members, how interested was everyone in technology? Because I think it's quite interesting in regards to what they actually played.
How interested were the Neubauten members in technology? Well, I don't know. It was a different setup then. Like I said, I remember Alex being interested in the recording technology for sure. Mark wasn't interested at all. Mark was very much had a management role in the band, and a super important bass player.
And still kind of has.
Obviously, a very important.
And the sportsman, you wanted to have Mark on your team if you played table football or something like that.
Okay. But he had, and you know, obviously, you know, lead vocalists being what they are, the lead vocal had to sound right for sure. You know. If Mr. I mean, I love Blitz's poetry anyway, so for me that was a joy, you know. But so he was kind of interested in the whole vibe, because of course that's supporting the lyric, you know. Mufti was also, I remember him as being pretty interested in
very interested. Yeah. That's with Mufti, with FM Einheit, I experienced for the first time music without a rotating medium. With Mufti, with you, we experienced for the first time like the DAT tapes, the
sampling,
and also the format before that, the on beta cassettes, these
Sony F1.
PCM tapes or something. That was the first digital recordings. But with Mufti, I remember he was the first person to actually play me his new music coming from a hard drive. So you would walk into a room and there was no rotation whatsoever. Nothing was rotating. Not a tape, not even a small cassette.
The hard drive was spinning, but you couldn't see it.
You couldn't see it. And suddenly there was music, and also with digital technology, you wouldn't hear the hiss, the mandatory hiss that everything else you would
we love.
Where everything would announce itself, you know, like, oh, watch out, there'll be music in a minute, you know, and then digital music, you know, would just like come and, what the hell is going on?
Yeah.
And so Mufti was always very much into technology.
I agree with that. That's very much my memory of Mr. Einheit as well, because when we made a track called, a 12-inch called Jugend, I had an analog sampler that was made in Berlin, called Mr. Lab. Do you remember the Mr. Lab? It had little buttons on it. And I had a very powerful but very simple early digital sampler that we were triggering from the Mr. Lab, and Mufti was on it immediately. And I didn't know if he would be, because I knew him before that as a very muscular beat maker, a physical player. That's how I knew him before that, hitting drums, playing beats very powerfully. And so I was a bit nervous bringing the sampler and the sequencer, but he was on it straight away, because his mind moved to another level, you know, a deep musical level. He got it. I mean, I think the whole band got it, but I was nervous. You know, I thought, well, I'm gonna share this. Maybe they'll hate it. But he was straight. It was great. It was awesome to see, because basically I thought he was a bit like a caveman or something, and then he turned out to be this total programming nerd. as well.
You
know,
should
there's two
meet
sides
some
of-
programming nerds. They can be cavemen.
Yeah, absolutely. Many of us are, you know.
It's not really a contradiction.
No, exactly. But, you know, but there are some live percussion players who don't like sequencing. I know many great...
Or click tracks for that matter.
For instance. There are many, many, many great percussionists who were not interested in sequencing at all. Why would they be? Because they can play anything. But he was very interested immediately. You know.
That's a different thing, though, because that's time-based, and I think Mufti is interested in sounds, so he liked a sampler as he liked unusual instruments, right?
Well, we were also that the idea, it came up, it's a completely different philosophical concept as to play music with instruments. If you play samples, you are playing events, actual events in time. You see what I mean? Like before that, you would, with the synthesizer, you would try to imitate the sound of breaking glass. With sampling, you could just break the glass and then, you know, sequence that actual event, you know, and that was a completely new thing. You know, you would have this like godlike, you know, delusions of grandeur because you could rearrange events in time more than just playing music.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And also we were, in all the work we did together and all the work I did with samplers, it was very much about capturing real events from the real world. I personally was never interested in playing an oboe in a sampler, you know, or a violin or something. I mean, it's quite big money now. It's quite Spitfire, and there's loads of big samples. It's a big thing now to have a bass, Scarby, and Spitfire, and loads of real pianos in. And that's all. That's kind of whatever. It is what it is. I think it's. I'm not interested personally. I was always super excited by the idea of taking a sound from the real world. Woof.
And also, it would give you new possibilities in terms of size. See, we would work with these. We had these tables that would tell us the exact tape speeds for different keys. Right? You knew how to slow down a tape in order to transpose the music to a different key. And with sampling, you could do the thing where by like a tiny instrument, like a tiny glass, if you play it back at a slower speed, it would become larger, and the other way around, you know. So you could make giant things tiny, or tiny things turn them into giant objects.
And that's one of
sampling.
the. It's magic, isn't it? Everyone's got a recording studio now because everyone's got a laptop. But one of the magic things about recording sound for me is that you can make the quietest real sound the loudest sound on the track, if you want to. Mm-hmm. You don't have to, but if you want to, I've done that. I made a track with and that's amazing, you know. So you can record a really loud sound, and it's really quiet in the mix, mm-hmm. and then you can have a really quiet sound and make it really loud. That's kind of.
But Gareth, and you'll never get to play that video if we go on like this.
That's all right. This is actually really interesting, and I love how enthusiastic you're about the fact that you can do those things, because you've sat behind mixing desks for like 4 decades, and you still think it's a miracle. Well,
no, also
maybe I'm a bit slow.
No, also what Gareth used to do is, like particularly in this room, what you could do in this room very nicely is we would sit in the middle of this room on the floor and record very tiny sounds, but Gareth would put the microphones through really heavy compression in our headphones. So we would sit in here with the headphones on and record tiniest, you know, dropping the tiniest objects on the floor and stuff like that. And we had to move very carefully because the headphones were so compressed and so loud, you know, that if we went like this, you know, we would have blown our ears out. So
yeah, I had that with, I had that experience the first time I went to the Far East in the 80s with a recording Walkman. And this is really obvious, right? But I put the headphones on and then turned up the volume of the microphone, and then it was exactly, it was pretty much like the real world, only louder. It was great. It was really great. Listen, it's like the real world, but it blew my little mind. It blew my little mind out.
I'm going to play a bit of this video because it blew my mind a bit, and then we're going to continue with those stories.
Well, that
you were 16.
I was 16, yes. That's me at the Tempodrom, which was actually right over there on Potsdamer Platz. Thank you. That was from the Große Untergangsshow, das Festival genialer Dilettanten at the Tempodrom, which that festival spurred a kind of a fake musical movement called Geniale Dilettanten, where it was also imperative to misspell the word Dilettanten. and that was Christiane F. playing guitar there with me. And
Who was your partner?
Yeah,
you
she
didn't
was
say partner when you were 16, you said girlfriend.
No, she was
I
my
guess.
first girlfriend. Yeah. And
that is a bit scary, I must say. I was a little bit frightened. I was boasting before about not being frightened, man. I was a little bit frightened seeing that.
Yeah, and I was 16, and I was wearing her leather jacket that tells you how skinny I was.
1981, 4th of
Yep.
September. Yeah, 1981. Even have the exact date here. I wanted to play that not at last because I mean, Neubauten to me has always been a band that you want to see live. Did you see Neubauten live before you worked with them?
Probably not. I might have done, I can't remember. The thing is, I didn't go out much, and I was very obsessed with being in the recording studio. In fact, for me, most of my musical experience has been listening to records and later CDs and whatever, streams and shit. So I'm a kind of headphones guy or sitting at home with the speakers. That's kind of how I've experienced music in my life. And it was hearing music on speakers that made me want to get into recording studios and help record records. Because I was obsessed by it and I thought it was just incredible. So in other words, I never came to recording trying to capture some kind of live. It wasn't that I thought, oh, these bands are great live, one must get them in the studio. I kind of saw the studio as a whole separate thing, you know. I never cared how difficult it would be to make the recording work on the stage. That was never my problem, and I was never that interested in it. But I mean, having said that, I saw Neubauten. I have seen the band many times live, and I just saw them recently in London at the Forum, and it was an incredible gig.
Thank
so
you.
if anyone's not seen the new, I don't know if is it Berlin happened already? Berlin's.
Well, we're looking into Berlin for the fall, so we might.
It's a long time since I've seen the band live, and it was a great show. So I do love live music, but it was just and also when I was young, what I'm trying to say is I was learning how to make recordings, and a lot of that seemed to be staying in the studio all the time, all hours, and just working all the time in the studio. So stupidly, some bands, I would never work with a band now without meeting them and going to the rehearsal room and hopefully going live and getting to know them. But sometimes, back in those days, I would kind of meet the band in the studio on the first day of the recording session, you know. So, a different life, different times.
I can relate to that. Also for me, there's the one aspect of, you know, like the performance and the excitement of seeing bands live, but also what I was really interested in, what was really magic for me, and still is really magic, is when you have a pair of really nicely aligned stereo speakers and you sit in the sweet spot between two speakers like you do in a studio between your near-field monitors, you actually don't hear the music coming out of the speakers. You cannot point at the direction anymore. It kind of materializes like right in front of you in this space between the speakers. And that's, for me, that still is about listening to music on stereophonic equipment. That still is like the most amazing thing, you know, that you suddenly hear this wonderful sound in the middle of the room, even though you have those two speakers there. It's like right there in front of you. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. And that's an experience that's very repeatable now when we're working, if you turn the computer screen off. Because the experience that we've had the privilege of having the magic of that experience in pre-digital technology where the music's on tape, so you're not looking at a screen. So if you want to have a really amazing listening experience, you might turn the lights down and press the tape machine. And I can only get that now in my little workroom. If I'd like to, I've got a button on the side of the screen because I've got a separate screen, and I turn the screen off, and then I can kind of sit, because when my eyes are focused on the screen, it's harder to have that magic experience for
Absolutely,
me.
yeah. You listen differently when you look at a computer screen. That's definitely true. And also, still, when we work with Neubauten, we insist on being these 5 mooks in a room who do not look at computer screens. You know, so we do have the engineer that takes care of editing and stuff like that later on. You know, we assign him to, you know, like tasks that he needs, chores that he needs to do. But while we play music together, we don't look at computer screens.
Right on.
But you talked about this hard drive earlier, right? And when you first started working together, there was no computers involved.
No.
Was
no.
there? There were like the hard drive that was much later, probably more like.
Yeah, the hard drive was much later. I was just telling that story to illustrate how technology savvy Mufti was.
Yeah.
No. When we were working here, it was all 24-track tape machines, which also were amazing. We kind of worked our way up from 4-track to 8-track to 16-track, and then here you had two 24-track machines sync to each other, which was amazing. And earlier we were talking about that there's a loop actually going on in Collapsing New People, which is like a printing machine that Gareth recorded somewhere in Berlin. And in order to do that, he made a loop of it. And a loop back in the days meant an actual physical tape loop, and I was talking about this for another thing about the Hansa Studio recently, and we would have these tape loops going across from the control room was over there where the bar is right now, and we would have these tape loops, you know, like supported by microphone stands going all the way through the whole length of the hallway, you know, in order to get like really long tape loops of things.
Yeah. Really, because we were a bit crazy, and
and we would do things with Neubauten. We would do things. We would cut little holes, you know, with a you know, what do you call them, like a locher, with a hole puncher. We would cut little holes in it while it was going by, or you know, or burning the tape while it was going by and stuff like that.
Tape loops. It's a thing, isn't it? It's like you know, with analog technology like that, anyone knows it who's got guitar pedals or anything, you know, with analog technology and wires and amps and tape loops, it's much easier to make a creative mistake or to make a new discovery that you weren't planning on making. I find it quite difficult with a computer to make a mistake. I mean, obviously I can open a software synth that has a sound that I wasn't expecting, but the kind of creative mistakes that you can make with analog technology are really awesome.
No, mistakes on a computer are dreadful. That just means that you have to reboot, and
they're usually shit, right?
and that the show kind of stops at that moment. You know, you just go like, oh, what's going on? You know, like you get these glitches or whatever.
But mistakes with analog can be hugely creative.
Wonderful, yeah. And the whole thing about analog is also that it's an actual physical thing. You know, like there is this convention here once a year now called the Super Booth, where all these guys meet that work with the Euro Rack with those you know, like there's a whole community of people that build little synthesizer modules in a certain format, and it's great because these guys, I mean, aside from the fact that it's just like, you know, like nerds meeting, you know, for their Modelleisenbahn, or you know, like miniature model trains, and it's like, oh, I need to get a new steam engine for my, you know, like. But the thing about that fascination and about analog working with actual tape and stuff, and is that it's an actual physical process. It's not like moving this glass from here to here means a certain combinations of zeros and ones, but I actually move the glass.
You actually move the fucking glass.
You actually move the glass.
I know.
Right?
I know.
And
on the computer, it's all imaginary. I mean, you hear melodies and shit. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not knocking it. I get it. We all use computers.
Yes.
It's awesome fun, but it is actually not real. And every once in a while, you have to say to yourself, "It's just a fantasy behind a glass screen. What I'm doing." You know, which is different. I want to just follow up what you're talking about, because I borrowed a little modular for those who are coming to the base camp. I borrowed a little modular from Schneider's, from our friend Andreas Schneider.
Which is the church of modular geekism.
Guy, and very important in my life as well, this guy. But that might be another story. But I borrowed a modular, and I have, so I've got all the devices in this module that I borrowed, I have in London, okay? So I know it pretty well. So I'm sitting in the back room in a little studio down there, and I'm plugging it up to make a noise before you guys arrive for the base camp, because I thought, well, I want to have a bit of a noise on it, just for a vibe, you know? So, and then it starts making this incredible noise, and I'm thinking, they must have changed this module, because I have this module, and I've never heard it sound like this. And then I look at it, and I've plugged something in wrong. But it sounds incredible, and I had exactly that kind of discovery just this afternoon. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Yes. I plug that in there, it does that. Yeah. You know.
And that's the whole magic about places like this and working with analog technology and stuff. It's I find, in my opinion, it's the ritualistic aspect of that, because you're making a conscious decision to do something physically, to do something, rather than having the assumption of an actual event, which it is in the digital world. It is just basically the digital world is just the bus map or the schedule. The digital world is the bus schedule, but the analog world is to take the actual bus and go from A to B. Yeah. That's where I see.
Yeah. M41.
That works for me because I'm very interested in process. And part of what we did together in this room when I had the great pleasure of working with Alex and the band was to embark upon a process where we didn't really know how it was. We knew we might, Mr. Bargeld might have had the lyrics, Mr. Reinhardt might have had a beat, Mr. Hacke might have had a guitar riff or an idea. But more importantly, almost, was we all committed to a process which was to come in here and build some shit and see what happened and choose the good bits. And it's that's so important, I think. I'm not the kind of person who I can't imagine what a record's going to sound like. But I do like going on the process and saying, well, look, if we all get together in the room with some amps and some guitars and some musicians and a tape recorder, we'll probably make something awesome. And we did.
And also, in the physical world, you have to make the conscious decision of when to not play, much more than in the digital realm,
Let me tell you maybe what I find the hardest to imagine when talking about recording on tape is that when you delete a thing or you destroy a thing by burning the tape, it's gone. Because today you have a backup, and you have a backup of your backup, and then maybe you have a cloud or whatever, or maybe you don't have all of these things, but then you're a bit stupid, probably. But then you had 24 tracks or 48 tracks maybe, and then when they were full and you wanted to do a thing again, it meant getting rid of the thing that was on the tape before, and then it's gone.
Yeah, there's in Algeria, I think it is, where the whole music industry worked on cassette tapes. The recording studios where they worked at, those Algerian Chep, Mami, and all these different Algerian musicians, they only possessed one single 24 reel. And the entire music of the country for 20 years was recorded on one reel of tape. That was just like recorded over and over. Yeah.
That's the model now. If you're lucky enough to work on tape now, you find an old bit of tape that's been used before because it's so expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, like more in the actual writing process, the process you talked about earlier,
Yeah,
that you had to, like, as a band, you know, one maybe liked the guitar sound and the guitarist didn't, or the other way around, or you were saying it's great, and then you had to come to a decision of redoing it or
Absolutely.
not. You
That's
couldn't
what's
like
good
keep
about
every
it.
copy.
Yes.
That's the bonus. That's what's good about it. I mean, you know, that's what makes it so powerful. Because you have to say, you know, we've all been there with a full reel of tape, you know, and let's say the guitar solo, you know, and then the guitar solo player says that I can do better than that, and then everyone looks a bit nervous because they know exactly what that means, and then you have to like step up and do better. Mm-hmm. That's incredible.
Or if you would drop in, you know, say like, I think that was a really good take, except the first 2 bars, I fucked those up. I want to redo the first 2 bars, and then you would have the, you know, like the hotshot engineer that just goes like, bop, bop, you know, and then you just like, would just like get like that spot, you know, and that was sportsmanship, you know, back then.
Exactly, it's exciting. Yeah, yeah, that's sportsmanship. Yeah.
And
it's
also
trust, a lot of trust.
Oh yeah.
Because the engineer has to trust the guitarist, and
Oh
the
yeah.
guitarist has to trust the engineer. It's team building.
And you could have real life-changing, traumatizing catastrophes. Like, you know, at one point we had I think an entire string ensemble that was in a studio in Belgium, had an entire string ensemble coming in and working the whole day with them on a certain piece. And then the engineer or tape operator at the time, he was, you know, like just clearing the slave tapes. Like if you work with two reel-to-reel tape machines, one would be the master and one would be the slave. And he was just like doing some rearranging, clearing. But basically what happened, he thought the slave was the master or the other way around, and he erased the entire string session, you know, with these musicians that came in from Brussels into the sticks. And I have never seen the man in such distress before or after. He just stood in the doorway and he was like completely pale and just like, I have to tell you guys something. And I felt so sorry for him. And this is something that only can happen with tape, you know. It was, you know, we had to get the entire gang of musicians back in and reschedule the whole thing. And basically he worked the whole sessions for free then. But yes. But, yeah.
I mean, that's probably a situation that you would not want to recreate, but you're saying it had some advantages to be able to actually delete things, like in terms of decision making. So when working with people now, how do you, I mean, both of you in each of your positions, how do you get to that point of decision making if you can keep like 80 million versions of everything?
You can't.
Well, it is very hard. I mean, you can humiliate your client into the position that it is very important what they are doing at that given time, but that won't make you very popular as a producer. But you can, I think you know what I'm talking about.
I mean, and we still get great performances. And I mean, I love your last record with Daniela. And it's full of great performances, and it's still possible to get great performances, but you cannot do the same thing, because it's the difference between walking across the Grand Canyon on the high wire without a safety rope and walking with a safety rope. Both journeys are mind-blowingly incredible, you know, and we've seen Red Bull do videos of extreme sports. Some are protected, some are not. And the achievement's the same. If you can walk across the Grand Canyon with a safety rope and you don't need it on a high wire, you know, that's an amazing achievement. But it's different from walking across without a safety rope. It's just a different thing.
Even though I think it is possible, and it also is a possible goal in the creation of art, to put that same urgency or to put that same danger in your given performance, you know, like you could, but it's a different mindset, you know. If you just go like, oh, I'm going to play along, I'm going to jam on this for a while. Basically, that's the whole thing. It's that also changed since digital. You know, back then there was jamming, and we knew it was jamming, you know, because nobody could afford, you know, to record that whole crap. Now you can record, you know, like
every little fart.
These, you know, like the most ridiculous jams, and I hate that word already, you know, and somebody will have to listen to that crap, you know, and there'll be hours and hours and hours of it, you know. So basically, I think it actually is necessary to put yourself in that mind state to a certain degree where everything you do or say or sing or play is precious at that moment, you know.
Because your energy is precious and your time's precious, and you get that, and I get it, and we've both worked on that level where where you invite a musician to play something on a track, or they want, and they don't play it 100 times. They maybe play it once, and you go, "Oh, thank you, Alex. Thank you for coming in and playing that whatever he played. Thank you, that's great." Or thanks for playing that organ, and it's amazing, you know. And there's many great artists who do that because, like Alex, they've learned that basically, if they're in the right state of mind and they've done their morning meditation and they are at peace with the world, they play or not, they play their solo or their piece in one take, and if they do another 25 takes, it's not going to be any better. So you short-circuit the whole thing. You play it once, and everyone goes, "Awesome!" And what a huge time saver that is already. Right there, you've saved like 3 days of listening to jams.
Yeah.
You know?
Or there were people like that, like the late great Chrislo Haas, who was the analog synthesizer player for Deutsch-Amerikanische Freundschaft and Liaison Dangereuse, you know, like this wonderful music, and he had a sense of this immediacy, this magic thing, which basically meant if he would play his synthesizers and you told him, "Oh, Chrislo, that's great," he said, "Yeah, really?" Boop, gone, erased. You know, he would just like take all the cables out as soon as you told him. And whenever I worked with him in his later years, I had to record him secretly because I knew if he knew that I was recording him, he would just deliberately do crap, you know, because he wanted to keep exactly that
special
kind of
live moment,
that danger to it, that unpredictability.
Unpredictability, yeah.
Yes, all right.
I think we should listen to another track that was done, I think, many years before either of you started doing morning meditation. It's not going to have a video. You can leave that off if you want to. Should we go for Seele, Brennt? Because you're
Absolutely,
saying
because Seele, Brennt, let me explain first. Seele, Brennt was recorded in this room, and we recorded it like a theater play and also like a painting. So basically, everything we did the whole song is recorded in one take without any overdubs. It's recorded in this room as the room is. That's the theater play part. And the painting part is that all the microphones were placed in a way that, like Blixer singing, his whispering and his screaming and stuff, as he actually had to, like in the olden days, he had to move closer and further away from the microphone in order to get different levels. So basically, you know, if something is louder, it's actually coming closer to you, you know. It's a great track, and you really hear that room.
From your 1985 album, Halber Mensch.
There's one more, of course. Never mind.
But I want to say something about that as well, because I grew up loving, I still love much classical music. It's a very broad thing, right, obviously, but anyway. But I love dynamic in music. And one of the awesome things about the Neubauten gig that I saw last Thursday is the huge dynamic in it. And for those people who attend, I mean, everyone's got their own Geschmack, you know, everyone should do what they want. But I've really enjoyed hearing that some of the participants' music in Nach Straße this afternoon, but the thing that was missing for me in the big picture is dynamic. And I'm just flagging that up. If you like dynamic, build it into your compositions. These guys are building it into the composition back then, and they are still using huge dynamic live now. And to me, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, I fucking love that shit, man.
Thank you. Thank you. No, I think dynamics is very important because it's about the spectrum, and then, you know, we all know about the loudness wars in mastering now, that people just try to make the loudest possible records, and the mastering engineer of Metallica apparently refused to have his name on the record for the way they wanted the music mastered and stuff like that. And I think dynamics are very important, and I loved the time when the CD was invented. Remember the first CDs, particularly classical music CDs, came out, and they had to put a warning stickers on the CDs. Remember that, saying like careful, high dynamic range or something like that, because people would, you know, they were used to the dynamic range of a record, of a normal vinyl record. And then the CD came, and particularly with classical music, you know, it would be the you know, like the overture would be very, very quiet and stuff like that. And then the actual first, you know, movement would come in, and would come in at a volume that would just kill people's stereos, and
blow the speakers up.
And that was great that time. And that's the good thing about vinyl. The good thing about digital is that you can conserve a much higher dynamic range.
There's lots of awesome things about digital. Our esteemed colleague, a fellow worker, Mr. Brian Eno, says that anyone who romanticizes working on tape never did it. You know, because what we're talking about, I feel, is the analog process, which can be a room, like you're working with Neubauten now, a room full of people and effects and amps and instruments. Okay, it's going to digital, but the creativity comes from a certain part of the creativity.
Yeah.
And another thing about dynamic I wanted to say is, it's interesting, because in film, dynamic is really big still, even in mainstream Hollywood film. If you watch Star Wars, sometimes it's really bright. I mean, I'm not talking about the sound, I'm talking about the image. Sometimes it's really dark. Duh. You know, so they have a really dark bit for ages, for like 5 minutes, and then it goes all really light. And that's really commercial and really exciting. You know, it's kind of got a bit lost in music, because, you know, everyone's trying to make it slam out the fucking iPhone. Don't get me started, actually.
Yeah. No, but also I would add, if you romanticize working with tape, you never worked with tape with a hangover. You know, because that was the whole thing about, you know, like, if you had to, and again, the danger of the medium, you know, if you would rehearse, if you would rearrange music, you would first record it on a 1/4-inch tape, on a Schnürsenkel, and then you would rehearse your edits there, and then later on you would do the edits on the actual 1/4-inch tape.
No, on the actual
2-inch tape, which on one hand was easier to edit because it was 2 inches that thick and not like the 1/4-inch just that thick. But it would be the real deal, and if you fucked that up, then you would be in trouble, you know, if you fucked that edit up. And basically, I remember when I had to cut tapes, and I did that for quite a while before actual sampling was invented, that we would cut tape loops and stuff, and it could be a very shaky business, you know, like, and I also did a lot of tape editing for cassette tapes. I would open cassette tapes up and actually edit the tape in a cassette too, you know. So yeah, there's nothing to be romanticized about that.
No, there's not. No, and that's really super challenging, and that's one of the joys of 2-track. I mean, now any edit is possible, right?
Yeah.
Any edit is now possible, which is incredibly
liberating.
and
you would do crossfades by actually cutting the tape diagonally, right? Which was difficult too.
It's good that you mentioned the hangover, because there's another kind of dynamic that I want to talk to you about, and that is sort of the dynamic in a group, playing in a band, and also between the producer and a band. Because the track we just heard, Seele, Brennt, is on this album that is, I think, usually referred to as being an album about a night on amphetamine and the hangover that goes with it, which is sort of the track that we just heard. How would you as a producer have stepped in that dynamic of a band who has been on drugs, as is no secret either? How would you set up certain times? Would you think about that at all, or did things just happen? You laugh, which makes me assume that things just happened.
You tell him, Jonesy.
No, I'm not laughing at the idea of telling Neubauten what to do is absurd. Do you know what I mean? It's just absolutely absurd. And anyway, I'm not that kind of producer. So we found a way to work. This was, there was a different. We were all a lot younger, okay? And I'm not saying, don't do drugs, kids, okay? I have to say that, do not do drugs. But when I worked with, I don't know who, I remember working with Neubauten, very long hours, and I would like to work very long hours as well. I was already through I had a heavy amphetamine phase in London, which was not good for me. I was already through that. I'd stopped using amphetamines because I thought, fuck, I'm never doing this again. I nearly died probably, so it's not good. So, because I'm excessive, So anyway, so I'm working with them. There was some stimulants being taken, for sure, and one of the really super positive things about it was we'd work very late at night, and then usually, with a normal production, you'd work very late at night, and the next day you'd rock up to the studio at 2 in the afternoon or something, or 1 in the afternoon, and you'd wait around for hours for the band to turn up. But I remember working with you guys, and then we'd work till 3 in the morning.
And we were still there.
Yes, you were still there, waiting at the studio door the next morning at 10 o'clock, because you'd been on the town all night. That was incredible. So,
let's put it that way. Like that album is not about amphetamine. It's about never going to sleep and delusions of grandeur, which boils down to the same thing, but let's put it that way.
Yeah. So obviously it's super challenging, and you have to remember that it was a time when there was a lot more money available for people like us to play about in spaces like this, which is awesome privilege for us, huge growth experience for us. We learned so much. We formed lifelong friendships as well, so it's incredibly important to our personal story. But there was, because people still bought music, and music's obviously now free, because people still bought music, there was more money available, even for a bunch of weirdos like us, to be able to work in a space like this. So all I'm saying now is a lot of the younger groups I work with now are very focused on getting the most out of a studio time, in a way that we just thought it was self-evident we could have 3 weeks in Hansa to make you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a kind of different vibe. And then if we hadn't finished after 3 weeks, someone would phone the record company and say, "Oh, can we have another week, please?" or something, and they go, "Yeah, no problem." And that never happens to me now.
And also, I think in order, I cannot emphasize that enough, that ritualistic aspect of things, not only working with analog, when we talked about earlier, but also in general when you produce music or when you produce art, as it is in drugs, you have to have the set and the setting, and the same counts for making art, I think, is you have to have the right setting, the right people around you, and it's that ritualistic aspect where you say, I do this now, and in order to do this now, I prepare myself in this and that way. And I remember there can obviously be great substitutes for drugs that also give you that same sense of the presence or the present. Nowadays I light some incense, you know, and I know because I have lit that incense, this is the time when I am going to do certain things, you know, and I set the occasion for that. And I remember Gareth fixing a masala chai for us in a different studio, in the Tritonus studio, you know, back in the day. And that was a preparation. Masala chai is this like Indian spice tea, and it needed to boil or cook for hours or days or something, you know. And Gareth would put on, you know, prepare this tea for us and boil it for hours and hours. And I remember feeling that this was, you know, like appropriate preparation for something great to happen. And that's, you know, so it's very similar. And if in the drug culture might give you an entrance into this way of thinking, you know, without necessarily having to stick to those stupid substances that make you do stupid things.
I spoke to a musician the other day, a jazz player called Leo Smith, and he's Muslim, and he told me that in his belief, he's taught to step out of the house in the morning with his right foot first, and what he actually does when he goes on stage is stepping on stage with the right foot first, for the sole reason that means he's doing it intentful. He is being aware of, like, now he is stepping on stage. Because we talked a lot about, we compared a lot, like the technology back in the days and nowadays. Would you think that is maybe posing a problem for people who work in bedroom studios? It's kind of hard to like step from your bed to your desk intentful if it's right next to each other. How do you create intentfulness?
Through physical and mental preparation. I mean, it's perfectly possible to do, you know, to me, a recording studio is still a wonderful space and a great privilege, and you need a wonderful space. You've got a great space in Berlin, haven't you, with Boris? You need, if a bunch of people want to play together, you need a space. But for me, a recording studio is like a state of mind now, where the laptop is the recording studio. Mm-hmm. There was a transitional moment in my life where my laptop became as powerful as the Hansa mix room. And I remember it quite well. I thought, oh, look, everything that I had in the Hansa mix room is now on my laptop.
When was that?
4 years ago, maybe. And that was kind of mind-blowing in some way. So the studios exist everywhere. So the only thing we can take responsibility for is ourselves now, and say, am I in the right space to enter my studio and do my best work? And I can do that sometimes in my bedroom, and I can do that sometimes somewhere else, in my little shed that I work in London, or in a recording studio. I did a piece recently where we collaborated remotely with Hamburg, Berlin, and London, and on the final day, everyone was working and feeding into the final mix. And that was incredible, and there was no studio involved on my end. I mean, there was my laptop. I was in a bedroom, essentially. I think physical and mental preparation is hugely important, and that can be different for everyone. I write a journal, and I do it almost every day. It's kind of my meditation. It's here, actually. It's pretty precious to me. It's kind of part of my life. And recently I've started lighting a candle. So in the morning, I take my green tea. I mean, it's just old hippie shit, really. Sorry. Anyway, I take green tea and I light a candle, and then I go deep into myself and my journal, and then magic happens. And then I emerge, and then I go to my day, and then magic happens.
Yeah, I mean, after all, magic, imagination, you know, we're just picturing the things, you know, like we do that with a certain preparation. Yeah, and also that laptop thing, a few years ago, in 2003, that's not a few years ago, that's many years ago now. Anyway, I decided that I didn't want to work in a studio anymore, and I decided to make a record, a road record, like a film director makes a road movie, and there's certain parameters for a road movie. A road movie doesn't have a fixed script, or a script with no fixed ending, mostly or oftentimes. it is done during a journey, obviously, and it is done with involving the people that you meet on that journey. And I decided to make a record that way. And that was a very similar process, or very different process like that also, that one has to apply in modern times, because now I could work with all kinds of very different musicians that I would never get into the same room into Berlin, because they were from completely different genres of music, or they would live in completely different corners of the world. But I could have them play on the same music, and also I would record something. It means I would collect something, pick up something at one end of the world, and while I was carrying it to the next place, I was, fucking about with it, processing it, like turning it. So I would turn that actual event during the journey into a different event and present the next person with it, who would then add something to it, which I again would process during the journey. And that all happened, obviously, in my little piece of digital equipment,
That's a really interesting way of working, and it's one way of tricking yourself. I made a record with my friend Nick Hook last year, which is called Spiritual Friendship, and we realized very early, it started off as a complete experiment, and it stayed an experiment. We realized very early, for us, at that time in our life, he lives in New York and I live in London. The only way we could do it was by being in the same room. So we committed to the process, and our time was very precious to us because we had no money, basically, and every day we spent working together. We were not generating any money, and so we didn't waste each other's time. So we constantly tried to be hugely productive, focused, centered, present, phones off, please, internet off, please, be present, So, and that worked for us. Hey, we heard the final track from the album in Halberstrasse earlier on, but it wasn't anything like loud enough, so don't judge the record from that.
I want to listen to one other track that we spoke about earlier, actually, Kein Bestandteil sein, of another album of yours, the second that you did together, Fünf auf der nach oben, offenen Richterskala.
It's a nice snappy title.
I can maybe kill it for a moment. I can shortly explain what you are hearing. But this was an experimental setup that we did in this room also. Mufti is drumming on one of the Hansa chairs that they used to have, like old school chairs. He's drumming on a chair, and we had set up an array of plastic tubes, maybe like 16 different plastic tubes, long plastic tubes that you get in the Baumarkt, in the home improvement store, and each with a microphone. And Gareth had like leveled everything nicely, and Blixer was sitting at the mixing desk, turning the faders of each on and off, switching on the different plastic tubes, and of course every tube, every different length has a different key. So he was actually playing a melody on the mixing desk, while Mufti was just playing on the same chair, and that's what you're hearing.
And this is happening live in real time.
Yeah. Yeah, some classic sociopath drumming there.
Of course, the lead vocal's not being done live there. We're just talking about the tuning of the pipes.
I remember a story that involved a gun. Is that actually on this track?
No, that's on no track. There's a really funny story about when we recorded Jugend. Feed My Ego, or the track that involved, that was about feed my ego, delusions of grandeur, staying awake, that kind of stuff. So in order to do, and it was the first track that involved sampling and a sequencer. you know, the Jugend.
Exactly.
And so we recorded all these different, you know, we recorded the blades basically that we used to edit the tapes before. We recorded the blades on different surfaces. You know, basically in the bathroom, on the toilet, on the top of the toilet bowl, on cassette covers, you know, like we wanted this particular sound for the recording. I don't know why. And Andrew had a gun. He brought a gun to the session that would shoot blanks. And as we were in the bathroom recording the blades, I thought it would be a really fun idea to shoot that gun, you know, so to give everyone in the control room a jump. And
because we've got the microphones on really loud because we're recording
something very quiet.
Tiny sound,
yeah.
you know.
And I thought it would be such a great idea, you know, just to shoot the gun. And so I thought it might be even better if I open the toilet bowl and then shoot into the toilet bowl, which is, you know, if you know something about acoustics and physics, is the most stupid thing you can possibly do, because the sound of the bang gets bundled in the toilet bowl, kind of, you know, like in a, you know, it gets amplified, bundled and thrown back at you at least 10 times louder than the actual gun is already. So basically, I shot in there, and my hearing just went off like that, and I couldn't hear anything. The day was done for me, and the guys in the control room, they didn't even notice that I was doing it because their equipment just went, that it just shut down. It just went, you know, they didn't even hear the bang because, you know. And I was just coming in there and said, like, I know that was really stupid and I can't hear anything. And I walked out of the studio, and I remember walking down Köthener Straße to Anhalter Bahnhof crying, thinking, you know, like, oh, I'm so stupid, I will never get. And I was so happy when the next day my hearing came back, finally.
I mean, we always, I mean, we still experiment all the time. This is not just about the past. We still experiment all the time.
Let's emphasize that.
Because otherwise we can't do anything new, and we never wanted to repeat ourselves. I never want to repeat myself. But Alex, I think all the artists I know don't want to repeat themselves. They constantly want to try and do something new. So we're always experimenting. So it's kind of self-evident with the pipes. We've dreamed up a new experiment. The guys made an awesome installation in this room. There are some photographs somewhere. It was like, you know, a gallery of hanging metal and all kinds of, it was amazing. And that was the process. No one knew exactly how that was going to turn out, but it's all about experimenting. And I feel that's really, it's obvious. It's important to underline, you know, our lives have been lives full of creative experiments, which means many of them turn out to be not usable, but that's all right.
Do you still approach sessions like this? Would you try to add experiments to a recording sessions, even if you felt that the band wouldn't maybe be in a too experimental mood?
I don't seem to attract artists who don't want to experiment. I seem to work with people who are very interested in experimenting, because that's just what keeps it fresh. You know, I mean, it can be. It's just a new experiment for a new team. Sometimes that can involve using 3 ideas that have been used in a different location by someone else, 3 different, you know, that you put together and you go, oh, look, if we did that and that and that, wow, we've never done that, let's try that. I thought lots of the work that I did early in my career was completely original, but it probably wasn't. It was just built on something that someone else, but it was new to me and new to the people I was working with, and that's like super important. Because if you feel you've made something truly new, that's a wonderful thing. It's like a new life. A little life has emerged into the world.
You've talked about this building quite a bit, with this being used as a recording room and then sort of a mixing room somewhere. If we think about maybe this last 2 Neubauten albums that you did here, how many people were actually involved? Like, how many people had to work on this for it to work with so many different rooms?
See, that's the difference between those days and nowadays too. Back then you had all these people involved that had to bear with us in a way. Nowadays, when I do things or when I go into a creative mode or when I work with Danielle or something like that, we have the ability to lock ourselves away and get deep into some experimentation, and we don't have to apologize to anyone afterwards. Back in the days here, it would be the poor tape operators that we tortured, and once in a while I meet some of the old guys that used to work here. It's like, oh yeah, I remember you, and see that's
they love you, man. They love you.
And that's the difference also. But that's also what makes a great studio like this, or like Connie Plank's studio in Wolperath in the near Cologne im Bergischen Land. That was also one of these cult places and I consider these places, and please forgive me for these semi-religious references, but I think this actually is a temple, or this is what it was for us, and there are a few studios nowadays that are still around that would qualify by my book to be a temple of creation, like this place used to be. And therefore, I think it is important, and this is what Gareth is trying to say, I believe, by reminding you all of the fact that these stories from the past are the stories from the past, but then what we do today is to transport that energy that we had back in those days, or that we kind of try to achieve that same intensity with different tools on different levels. And we should never stop, trying to do this. As soon as we start to work with any sort of formula, and as soon as we start to not take any risks, we might as well do something else.
Yes.
Because what you did a few years ago, is like you kind of embarked on a journey, a continuous journey a few years ago with your partner and your musical partner as well, Danielle, and you don't have a home anymore, so you work from on the road. Do you do that to create that intensity, to create from that spot?
Absolutely. I mean, that was a transformational process. I mean, because in order to do that, it started out that we rented this house here in Berlin that contained our studios back, and we lived there in that building from 2003 to 2010 for 7 years, until we realized this is ridiculous. We have this wonderful building that we rent that even has a garden and everything, but we can't have animals, we can't really take care for the garden, and we can't really enjoy the house because we travel all the time in order to pay the rent for it, because we couldn't, Berlin was just not happening for us at the time. And we decided to go on an 18-month journey in order to relocate. In order to do that, we had to get rid of all our material belongings. That means we divided everything in three. We one part went into the trash, or we sold it. One part we sold, one part went in the trash, and one part we put in storage. But basically, we had to get rid of everything, and that was a very transformational process. That's a really great. I can recommend it. Try to get rid of your stuff, and it's, the truth will set you free, I tell you. Because you start to realize all the time you spend in actually earning the money to purchase the stuff that you then have to take care for. That you're responsible for that stuff. Once you get rid of it, you feel a lot better. But anyhow, we didn't find anything after 18 months, so this is 7 years ago. So for 7 years now, we've been traveling the world, and we learned a lot about the world, and we learned a lot about our creative process and abilities by living that way.
I want to say something about connection, because you said how many people were involved in some of this work that we were privileged to do, okay? So that's a big question, because I think in society there's an idea that we're disconnected from each other and we all live in selfish little worlds, right? So we worked in this room. Now this room was built by 200 guys, maybe, in 1920. I don't know how many people built it.
1913.
So whenever it was built. It's an old room. That's a lot of people already. People grew the food that we ate whilst we were making the album. People delivered Strom und Wasser. And people took the shit away from the toilets. So that's a lot of people already. Someone made the mixing desk that we worked on. A big team of people. Neve in the 70s, probably 250 people in the company. Someone shipped the mixing desk from London to Berlin. Someone cabled it in. Someone built all the microphones, and on and on and on and on, man. It's a huge network of human collaboration in each of these pieces. Now, someone will say, if you run Gamer, you will say that the right of copyright belongs to the person who wrote the chords or the lyrics. But there's a massive human endeavor goes into all this. You know, I heard a wonderful spiritual teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, speak, where he said when he wakes up in the morning and he washes his face in the basin, he is very present man. If you're, he's ill now. He's very present. So he is aware of the fact that the water that he's washing his face has fallen from the cloud into the mountain and come all the way to his arm. You know, so I'm just very aware of that. It's a very big question. So how many people are involved in recording Seele, Brennt? I don't know, 25 million or something? I don't know. A lot of people are involved. It wasn't just me and Alex and the band and the assistant, you know.
And then, you know, it's just, you know, it's a professional hazard, or an occupational hazard, as you might put it, because we work in the field of vibrations. You know, music is vibrations, yeah. And then, you know, science knows by now that we are all vibrations anyway. So, you know, there's no real separation between you or me or him or us, you know, so we're all involved in the same thing.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to just amplify what Alex said. I did a similar thing. I had a little workroom, studio in London that I did the same, not the same thing as you did. It got too expensive for me, okay? Same kind of time, maybe, yeah. 2005, something like that. It just got too expensive. So I sold as much as I could. What I couldn't sell, I put in the trash. Almost everything went, apart from some microphones that I bought in the 80s here, that I thought, these are beautiful, they don't take up much space, I'm still making music, I'm going to keep these. Everything went. And then I rebuilt my toolkit with what I felt I needed. And that's changed the vibrational energy in my workspace massively now, because everything now in my workspace I use. And before, a lot of it, I was just like working to keep it repaired so that if I wanted to use it, it would be working. You know what I mean? Yes. Everything changed. It's a really great process getting rid of shit and kind of rebooting, you know. Yeah.
Before we maybe open it up to questions, in case there are any, I thought it would be nice to briefly speak about the Amanda Galas, because this is an artist who's going to play here in Berlin in 2 days, and who both of you knew in the 80s, and you, Gareth, worked with. You look shocked. No, you're trying to get in there to change over to the... who you, I think, must have met around the same time as Neubauten, is that right?
The Amanda came to Berlin on a DAAD grant in the 80s, which is Deutscher Akademischer Austauschdienst. That means she actually got funded to live here for a while and to write music, and that's how we met her, and struck up a bit of a friendship during that time, and she worked with Gareth, and we were also label mates. We were all on Mute Records at the time.
And that is still a thing, and that's a family thing. Can be, being on the same label means something. Even on a label as diverse as Mute Records, I think people are aware of the fact that, in fact, I met Diamanda because her brother, who's now dead, was a gay man, and she had struck up a friendship with another gay mute artist, Andy Bell from Erasure, and Andy had said how much he enjoyed working with me and how sensitive I was to capturing the human voice, or whatever. Something very nice. I love Andy, he's a dear friend. So Diamanda thought, that sounds interesting. Maybe that's the dude I need to work on my next album. So I met him. In fact, I met Diamanda through the label. So that's all I'm saying, underlining that, what you said. And obviously she's an awesome woman, and I heard her play. The first time I heard her play in Berlin, I was like at the back of the hall somewhere, and tears were just running down my cheeks because it was so emotionally cathartic, I suppose. I don't know, it was very, very powerful. And we had the great, it's just a pleasure and a privilege, This temple has been somehow a bit desecrated, actually, because now it's turned into like a corporate meeting space. And I know we're all kind of artists and musicians here, so we're not feeling too corporate, we're feeling pretty cool. But you could, I'm sorry, but I feel the temple's been desecrated. This is no longer a temple of sound.
I have one question regarding that. Does it matter to you, or did it matter to you that you were at one point not able to see the wall anymore from here? Is it sort of, people like refer to the studio and they're like, David Bowie said it in so many interviews, that you could actually see the wall separating both parts of Berlin from here, and that it mattered to him. Did it matter to you when it came down? Were you feeling that this space lost something?
Me personally, no, it didn't matter to me. I don't think I was working here I think I've moved on somewhere else. But also also it wasn't just, it was very desolate, wasn't it? Potsdamer Platz was very empty.
Oh, so wasteland, there was nothing there out there. You could watch, that it went on for miles. There was nothing there. Which obviously was, a great kind of view to have. Like upstairs, there's these balconies, and you could take a view.
It beats looking at the Sony building or something for me. Anyway, it was better, wasn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Even though I don't think it's too bad actually, that Sony Center. I think I grew to like that architecture.
I've been to the movies in there. I think.
Yes. It's like, yes, absolutely. It's like and it's the only cinema that plays only original version
there you
movies.
Go. That's probably why I went. Yeah.
Okay,
but I take it back.
But the thing is, it obviously, and we knew at the time when that happened, not when the reunification happened, but when the wall came down, that it would obviously be a game changer. It would obviously change our lives forever, and it did. And the city that I was born in and raised in does not exist anymore. I mean, that's just an incredible thing to be able to say for yourself, Well, the city I was born in doesn't exist anymore. No, it's not there anymore. It's a different city now.
Nor does the country, in a way.
And nor does the country. That's a thing. I was born in the West, so the country does still exist, but the city doesn't exist. If I was born in the East, then the country wouldn't exist either.
But that's, and I know you get this, that's a kind of thing, everything is change. Everything is change. I am change, you are change. She is change. We are all change. Life is change. So in a way, the city's changed, is all we're saying. Of course it's not the same. London's not the same city that I was in. No way is it the same city. I guess West Berlin's changed more, somehow, at this stage of its development. But you know, the British changed Dresden profoundly in the Second World War. You know, cities are change. You know, the Germans changed the East End of London massively. You know, it's not the same city as it was. But then, once you accept that life is change, we could say, well, actually, it is the same city. You know, I'm the same person that I was when I was 2 years old, but I'm not.
No.
But I am. So life for me is paradox. So I embrace paradox as I've got older. I've understood that it's not black or white, it's black and white. It's not yes or no. It's very often the most important things in my life, it's yes and no. Particle and wave.
Should we give
Rock
those
steady.
two a big round of applause?